What's up, summoners? King Blair here. With the upcoming balance patch next week, one thing you may have noticed that is missing from that balance patch is going to be character nerfs. And that's something that is kind of a decision that Smilegate has done time and time again. Smilegate does not like to nerf characters. Now, they have done it in the past, but most of the nerf, if not all, were during the first year, and we're going up onto the third year. So this no nerf approach has a lot of benefits as well as a lot of negatives that we will be discussing in this video. So for this video, we're going to be talking about that no nerf system. What's the good, what's the bad, and what's the okay, right? All the whole spectrum. If you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join the Discord server. Link down in the description. And if you think nerfs are good, make sure to let me know in the comments. If you think they're bad, also let me know what you think about each of them. And I also have made a poll asking you guys this so you can see what other people think in a more concise manner. But with that, let's get to the actual video. So first, kind of talking about the system, the no-nerf system, and why do you need balance patches overall. So whether you like it or not, Epic 7 is a game that is very heavily balanced around the PvP aspect. While we do occasionally get buffs and characters for PvE, the primary focus of most of balance patches are going to be in PvP, Arena, RTA, and Guild Wars, right? That is where the majority of the balancing decisions for characters are going to be, because for PvE, I mean, most things can work with PvE with the right gear. But for PvP, and Epic 7 is a very PvP-centered game. Nerfs and buffs are needed to keep a balanced game state for the most part, right? We can think of games like League of Legends or even something very similar to like Summoner's War. That's another gacha game. They do both buffs and nerfs to try to keep a stable gaming environment. Well, Smilegate said, we don't feel like doing the nerf part of it. We will buff the units that don't get as much use, but we're not going to nerf, right? And that's something that they never stated outright and explained why they don't nerf, but aside from the very early days of Epic 7, we have not gotten any nerfs, right? So it's a very weird decision. And the way that they balance, I have talked about it in the past, is by introducing counter units and introducing new units, kind of a power creep. So that's kind of the way they balance. And that, again, is going to be part of the implication of the good and the bad part of it, right? So now that we know that Epic 7 is a PvP-centered game and buffs and nerfs are usually needed, but they're not deciding on nerfs. So what does this no nerf mean for the game? Well, let's first start with the good, because there are goods to the game not having any nerfs. And one of the biggest ones is going to be that most of your units, for the most part, are going to remain relevant for a very long time. Now, when Smilegate has done recalls in the past, we do get all the resources from that unit back, and we do get all the mola, all the good stuff that we did, all the catalysts. So you don't lose that much time aside from the gear if it's hard to put in a different character. But that honestly is very rarely the case where a set of gear can go on a different character, right? So for the most part, they do have a way to give you back the resources. So there's no negative to losing the time in the unit, but it also does let you know that your units that you build and put your time into are going to be good for a very long time, which means that if you really like a unit, there's a good chance they'll be good for a long time. Let's take an example, such a very simple unit, Crow. Crawl is a unit that has been out since the game was first released, and he has never been bad, right? He's always been good, and that's a good thing because there's no real nerfs, right? And he's just a solid unit overall, and since there's no nerfs, he's staying relevant, right? And you will be able to use him for a very, very long time. There's no unit that directly counters him. He has a very basic, good kit. You can also look at the other scenario, which is going to be someone like Arbiter Vildred. Even after his nerfs with Alexa's Basket, Arbiter Vildred was dominating a big portion of the meta for a very long time. And there has been several heroes that have been released to try to counter it. But instead of nerfing him, they just kept releasing more and more heroes. And because of that, Arbiter Vildred to this day remains one of the strongest heroes in Epic 7. So you can think of that as a good and bad, and this will also come up in the bad section. But for the good part is, for the most part, the units that you have built, if you like them, if you've invested in them, they will remain relevant for a pretty long time. There are a lot of units that are good, that have been good for Lord knows how long. Think Falconeer Glory, right? There are a lot of units that remain good for a very long time. So that part is really, really cool. That nerf aspect, that is really cool. The other part, this one's more of like the in-between. So now, that's the only real good, is that units remain relevant for a very long time. There's a lot of safe options that players can build that will remain good for a long time. I could talk about Bazaar, FCC, Seaside. There's a lot of units that are going to remain good for a very long time. So that's one of the positives. The other one, where you start getting more into like the medium, and even closer to the negatives, is going to be that since there is not going to be any nerfs, that means that for the most part, the way that characters are going to be nerfed is through the release of other units. So we create a chessboard scenario, right? Or not even a chessboard, more of a rock, paper, scissors scenario, where some of the units, the way that they lose and have counters is going to be through other units. Think, for example, someone like Seaside, who is another really good unit, but there's other units that directly counter her, such as things like Rowana. There are things like Solitaria that have been released, and even things like Fast Rider Crawl, right? So slowly, Seaside is still a really good unit, and she has her banner up right now. She's still amazing. Again, that's the positive side. And we also have some new units and new interactions, and more kind of like chess / rock, paper, scissors style gameplay because of the way that they balance, that is through the release of units. So whether you think that's good or bad, that's kind of a neutral one, because if you think it's good that we get kind of a rock, paper, scissors, kind of more of like a draft scenario skill type thing, that part is really cool. And that part can be fun in certain situations, right? It feels really good to hard counter a unit and be able to win fights off of that and just kind of can maneuver through it. So that one's kind of a neutral one. I can also see the negative side of it, because it means that there are units that exist just to counter a unit, right? And just to counter a certain thing. Case in point, things like Dilibet and things like Solitaria, instead of nerfing F10 and instead of nerfing SSB, those two units exist because of that, and they don't do a lot outside of countering those units, right? So that's kind of the negative aspect, is it limits game design. But okay, now that we have kind of a neutral side to it, where it's like, okay, that's a kind of a neutral, let's actually get to the negatives, and this is where the list starts to get really, really long. So first, let's start with a unit such as Carrot. So with Carrot being as strong as she is, and man, she is just ridiculous right now. She is just insane. Or even something like Spectre Tenebria, who gets better with time, or even things like Landy, who just keeps getting better with time as well. With these type of units, you get a situation where, because these units are highly unlikely, if not, like, there's probably no chance of them getting nerfed, right? That means that they will be dominating the meta and driving the meta a certain direction. For example, with Carrot being in the meta and her being so oppressive, she's essentially pushed out a lot of strategies from the game. With her existence, things like Ravi and Charlotte, there's no point to building these units as much, because honestly, why use Ravi when you can use Carrot, right, for PvP? Because Carrot just is going to outdamage the Ravi and is going to outlast the Ravi and it's going to be a lot better against different situations. Or even to an extent, Charlotte. Why use Charlotte when you can use Carrot, right? And also, just right now, it's a pick or ban unit, right, for the most part, for most ranks. For Legend, it may not be the case, since Legend players have all the counters to her. But for the most part, it creates a very polarized situation where if you don't like this unit will remain relevant for a very long time. Case in point, we can also see someone like Seaside Bellona. Again, a unit that we kind of talked about in the positives and the mediums. This unit has been around for ages, right? And she's dominated for ages. She's now finally starting to go on a small decline, although she's probably going to resurgence because of her banner rerun. So it's kind of one of those things that this unit has been around for ages. And there are units that can't even counter her, that are supposed to counter her, that honestly she still ends up winning somehow, right? So it creates a situation where you have these overtuned units where you are not going to be able to counter. The other problem is going to be from a new hero perspective. I don't know if you guys noticed, but because they don't nerf heroes, if you guys think about all the summons we recently got it, right now we have a rerun banner, but when you think of all the new hero summons, and I can go to the journal for some of the newer heroes, a lot of the newer heroes, aside from Polides, haven't done a lot, and that is because Smilegate is scared of releasing an overtuned unit, right? Because since they don't want to nerf, if they release something too strong, they can't do anything about it, which is why they release mediocre units. So when we look at something like honestly, all the 5-stars from this season, like Sanya and Ilna, both these units are not bad, and even more to an extent. All three of these units, they're not great, right? They barely made a splash, if at all, in the meta. Ilna, Sanya, Mort, they all kind of disappeared after the first week or two, right? People tried them out, they realized they're not that strong, and kind of just left them there, right? Even Landy on release wasn't that strong, and that's something that Smilegate is scared of, making a unit that is too strong. because they don't want to have to nerf the unit later on. And I don't understand why they're putting themselves in this corner, because I'd rather get some strong units on the release and then get 2 down a little bit later on. Although the argument that could be made for that is going to be that that would make the game pay to win, because it would be whoever has the newest unit becomes the strongest. So that one can maybe go into like the positive category depending how you look at it. But for the most part, that is the reason they release underwhelming units, right? Because they don't want to make a unit and then have to nerf it down the line, right? And that, you can see it for all the new heroes. Mediator Coward, same thing. They didn't want to make an overtuned unit. And to an extent, deciding a little bit, she's kind of put into a corner because she's put into a certain situation because of that rock, paper, scissors scenario that we talked about. But even like, we can go on and on. Inferno Kawazu was actually a well-designed unit. That one I have no problems with. But even like Urvalnen, underwhelming. Celine, to an extent, was a little bit on the underwhelming side, right? Soul Weavers, I don't think we've gotten any new Soul Weavers in some time. So that one, yeah, we just haven't had any new Soul Weavers in some time. And then for the Rangers, I mean, Flan on release was bad. She was mediocre, right? Because they were scared and they buffed her in the future. And that's their approach. But that does mean that they're going to be releasing underwhelming banner heroes, is because they are scared of creating a situation where a unit comes out and is too strong, right? And the unit just kind of dominates, right? Ida, again, pretty underwhelming. Solitaria, kind of underwhelming, right? A lot of the older units, though, are the ones that are very strong. But again, that's the problem with them non-nerfing units. So, kind of to summarize everything we've talked about today, overall, the no-nerf system is something we have to accept. I don't think it's right. To be completely honest with y'all, I see the positives, and there are certain things that are really cool about it, and there are some really cool interactions. But most PvP games have nerfs for a reason. And I think what they did in the past with the selector and with getting the resources back is more than enough of an incentive to kind of for players, right? To not worry too much about their characters getting nerfed, because you don't really lose a lot, right? You get all the resources back. I understand the standpoint that, hey, I spent on this unit. I wanted this unit, right, to do this thing. And I can understand why that can be frustrating in certain situations. But for the most part, the no nerfs, as we go down the line, we're going to be getting more of tennis. We're going to be getting more carrots and more units that are slowly going to be either break the game, break it or make it. And we may get another Arbiter Villager where we have a unit that just polarizes the meta. And we've kind of seen that with Carrot, right? Carrot is that unit that now some people do want her to get nerfed, although they're most likely you're going to be seeing her for a while now, right? Until they release more heroes that actually are able to counter her or deal with her or become the next problem. So that's going to be it for it. Overall, the no-nerf system is a little bit weird. I don't understand why smilegate likes it so much and the designer approach to the game. But then again, for the most part, it is really cool to see some old heroes still be relevant even to this day, right? That part is really awesome. Like, you can't say that that's not something that's really cool to see all your heroes get stronger and everything get better. But again, it could be something that down the line becomes a huge problem. So that is all I got for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace.